Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P. Joe Pisapia, with me as always every Monday morning. Jake Ciely of The Athletic, taking a look ahead to the guys to stash. And we're also going to talk about some of the players who changed their helmets over the last week, too. I want to get Jake's take on a few of these wide receivers that moved into different spots. So, Jake, real quick, let's hit up those guys up at the top, and then we'll talk about some of the stashes for Week 11 in the NFL. I want to talk first about Jakobi Meyers, obviously getting moved to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, at some point, we'll get Travis Hunter back. We'll see if some point we ever get a fully healthy and integrated BTJ. Parker Washington certainly was a busy guy. So how do you see the fantasy value of Jakobi Meyers rest of season in the situation he is with Jacksonville, with a potentially crowded wide receiver room down the stretch of the season?
Yeah, I actually think this is a good buy low opportunity, especially if everybody's going to panic about what just happened in this first game. It's his first game with the Jaguars, and this is heading into the one where they said, I'm sure you saw the same thing, even though you're on vacation, is what would they tell him his biggest power was? His superpower was catching the ball. I don't know if you saw that while you're on vacation, but that just tells you that they want them out there. Yeah, Brian Thomas.
It's a good, honestly, Jake, for a wide receiver, it's a pretty good superpower if you're going to catching the ball. Yeah.
The difference between Quentin Johnson before his weakness, his kryptonite, was not catching the ball until what he is now. So there's your perfect testament right there. But yes, Jakobi Meyers should be able to play outside and inside. I think that Parker Washington, if you grabbed them last week, is a decent sell high depending on your league. He only had 4 targets, but they had the 2 touchdowns, one of them being the special teams, because I think if everybody's healthy, the pecking order should be Brian Thomas, Jakobi Meyers, then Parker Washington. So I think that Jakobi Meyers is a decent buy low for the people that might be like, he might even been dropped, like that he wasn't anything in the first game.
Well, I love Parker Washington as a streamer this past week, and I talked about it on the TV on Sunday morning because I said, look, he's the guy that's fully integrated into the playbook, and he's the guy that clearly is going to have a lot of opportunities early on. You have to be patient with these guys who just got traded to a team. They don't know the playbook. They have no timing with the quarterback, and that brings us to the next guy on the list to talk about, which is Rashid Shaheed, who is now with the Seattle Seahawks. So this was a bold move here by the Seahawks. I like it. Look, Seattle clearly is a playoff contender. We know that. So what's Shaheed's fantasy value moving on from New Orleans?
I actually love him more as a buy low than the Jakobi Meyers situation, because that is somebody who is familiar with the playbook, but still didn't see a lot. A lot of it was Cooper Kupp, but also the Seahawks jumped out to a 4-touchdown lead before he even blinked. So all of a sudden they don't even get to throw the ball that much. I think we were sitting at Darnold was 9 for 11 for most of the first half, just because they didn't need to throw anymore because they're already dominating that game. But I actually had Shaheed as a wide receiver 3 going into this because he knew the playbook and because we didn't have time to adjust for a 4:00 game, but there was the uncertainty of whether Cooper Kupp was even going to play because he missed last week and then he was still not 100%. I still think this now potentially pushes Cooper Kupp to the number 3 role, which is what we were thinking that could happen with Torrey Horton. But now you have Shaheed come in. I think he's a wide receiver 3. And with the way that Sam Darnold's playing, super efficient. So there's always the downside that if he isn't completing 90% of his passes, that's potentially a little bit less of a good game. But I think Shaheed is going to be probably as soon as next week out there as somebody you can play as a wide receiver 3 in a lot of leagues. I think a lot of it wasn't so much so that it was his first game as it was just the Seahawks didn't need to throw the ball.
No, they certainly did not. They got up early in that one. Also, just before we get to the guys we want to add to real quick, we don't want to chase like the Mac Hollins performance. I don't think it'll be wise.
Your t-shirt guys.
Kyle Williams. My t-shirt guy. Hey, look, I'm very proud of my New England Patriots. It was a tremendous showing by them on the road. They are the road warriors this year, Jake Ciely. They really are. But again, from a fantasy standpoint, I know Kayshon Boutte was out for that game too. Look, you don't chase these kind of performances. But, I mean, to that one point, because Boutte was out, do you think people will end up throwing fab on these guys and they become irrelevant, obviously, in the week?
Yeah, so you didn't appreciate my wrestling reference there?
It was the Bushwhackers, I assume?
I know, but it was tag teams around that same time. That was just the only thing. I mean, what would you do for the Road Warriors?
My bald head, I think we're good. Then we're all right.
We'll do that at Flex next year in New York. Just come right over.
I will be drafting remote. Actually, no, it's more of a reason to even show up, I think, now. But anyway,
yeah, that's
Patriots
true.
Wide receivers,
take a picture of that.
Don't chase him, right?
Yeah, so, and that's the thing is the reason to bring this up is not even so Mac Hollins because people know Mac Hollins, but the excitement for Kyle Williams, as you know, as the rookie at the beginning of the season, he might be the number 2, big play threat, a very tantalizing prospect. And they have the Jets who have nothing left on defense. So credit to them for showing up in week 10 after everybody left them for dead. But on Thursday Night Football, maybe Kayshon Bouttie's held out one more week just because it's Thursday night and they give him that extra time. And then, okay, if you want to chase Kyle Williams for the big play, but you just said it too. It's him and Matt Collins. They're both the potential wide receiver fours for that big play upside. But if Boutie's back, then forget about it because it's Boutte and Stephon Diggs and then a little bit of Hunter Henry. So I wouldn't chase them. Like I said, we might not know and you might have to sprinkle some fab on either one just in case you need a wide receiver, but I wouldn't expect anything more than maybe one more game because Boutte should be back, if not this week, by next.
All right, let's get to the guys that we do want to add. The first one I'm going to talk about is Tez Johnson. Like, if he's still floating out there, I mean, he should not be, first of all.
No.
But if he is, even in a 10-team league, you got to have this guy. 2 touchdowns for him, 4 catches for 42. Now, I understand some of the garbage time work here at the end, but regardless, Tez Johnson has big playability. You know, if you're going to roster a guy like Jameson Williams on your roster, Tez Johnson is the same kind of upside. And frankly, I feel like Tez Johnson has been a little bit more reliable over the last 6 weeks necessarily. Not that JMO hasn't had a couple good games in there, but look, the scenario that they are in right now with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is they, are going to be continuing to push the ball downfield. Bucky Irving's health still in question. Tez Johnson is I think an integral piece at this point to this offense. And I feel like he is starting to grow a nice rapport with Baker Mayfield and confidence level too in big spots. And that to me is what sticks out about him. So this is more like a public service announcement. Tez Johnson should not still be available on waiver wires, correct?
No, he was under 33% on Yahoo. So I checked on Sleeper. He's still barely over 50% on Sleeper, which just seems like maybe because of the bye, maybe because people are worried about Chris Godwin coming back. But that similarly goes to the other team that we were just talking about with Shaheed and pushing Cooper Kupp. If and ever Chris Godwin comes back this season, he's not going to be the number 2 at this point. Tez Johnson, you and I talked a few weeks ago, and you remember I drew the comparison to like Kadarius Toney and Tank Dell. And that's pretty much what did I say to you at that time? I said, if you said Tank Dell on the Buccaneers, people would be going nuts. And I don't know why people aren't more excited for him.
That was 3 weeks ago, by the way, I think. At least
it was.
We had this conversation about Tez, and I can't believe he's still around 50 on Sleeper. It's nuts.
3 straight games with over 5 targets, 3 straight games with over 4 receptions, 3 straight games with over 40 yards, and he's scoring touchdowns. And I know the yards aren't near 100, but if you're looking, actually, if you go back 4 straight games over 40 yards, he's a touchdown maker for Baker Mayfield, and that's really what it comes down to. So, yes, Tez Johnson, rectify that if he's still somehow out there.
All right, let's get to number 2 on our list here, Darius Slayton of the New York Giants. Now, Slayton on Sunday had 4 receptions for 89 yards. He also got some time with Russell Wilson, which is something that no Giants fan wanted to see. And that's the big question mark here going into this coming week in Week 11. Is Jackson Dart left with a concussion? So what does that mean for Darius Slayton's value if we end up getting Russell Wilson under center again?
I don't worry too much about the Russell Wilson situation as it was that it looks like Darius Slayton's avoided injury because he came back in late for the game. Not a great matchup this week anyway because he's got Green Bay, but he has been the number 2. He has been the big play threat and has been doing actually a little bit better than Wan'Dale Robinson of late. But the good news after the Packers, yes, they have the Week 14 bye, but they have Lions, Patriots, Commanders, Vikings, Raiders, most of those teams you can pass on unless he gets number 1 coverage from your Patriots and Christian Gonzalez, which I don't see happening, but maybe, you never know. But especially Washington, Minnesota, and the Raiders to finish things out. It's one of the better schedules for pass catching options, so Dart should be back by then anyway. This is more of a wide receiver 4, especially at this point of the season. We're not really finding any wide receiver 2s outside maybe Tez Johnson. But this is just a kind of a depth piece that you could potentially use in the playoffs for the matchups.
All right, next up is Jayden Higgins. So another quarterback situation with the Texans. It's a little bit in flux right now. Davis Mills, tremendous comeback here, 36-29. They end up beating the Jaguars in Houston. And look, it was a big day for Nico Collins, but a big day also for Jayden Higgins, a rookie that I think a lot of us in this business had high expectations for at some point to be a contributor. So 5 for 42 and a touchdown. Was this the beginning of Jayden Higgins showing that he could be a contributor? Or is this something that we wash away because eventually CJ Stroud hasn't shown us that he even knows where Jayden Higgins is?
I know it would be thought the fact that we're wishing for Necky Mills to stay out there at quarterback to help Jayden Higgins. But the real appeal here is it's the Texans. The Texans finally moved to the 2 rookies, that being Higgins and Noel. It was actually the biggest snap count combined they've both had in the same game with a healthy Christian Kirk on top of it. So maybe it's finally changing for Jayden Higgins. Maybe this is one of those rookies that wasn't even complete until the second half of the season. And if Higgins is out there as a 1-2 with Nico Collins, whether it's Mills or back to CJ Stroud, he's somebody that could be a wide receiver 4, maybe even a wide receiver 3. Now, I'm not saying go out there and start him next week, but at the point of what we were hoping for, because he's basically been dropped in all the leagues because we never even saw anything from him, is that the hope going forward is that he's turning into the wide receiver 2 for the team that we hoped he could be. So this is pretty much a pick up and stash, as is pretty much the next 2 options after him as well.
Now, Rashid Shaheed moving on from New Orleans opened up some possibilities here for some other guys. So Devaughn Vele, you think, is one of those players. Now, he only saw a couple targets in this game, but again, that keeps him cheap this week. So why do you think Vele in deeper leagues is somebody to keep an eye on?
Because he immediately went out there in his first game with no Shaheed and saw almost the same amount of workload, opportunities, snap count, and all that type of stuff as Chris Olave. This is somebody they traded a 4th rounder for, like the biggest thing from the Broncos. So like, it's not that they got Vele for a 7th rounder. It's just like, oh, stash him on the roster. But Brandon Cooks was the only person he had to get past, and it looks like he's already passed him. And I'm not saying that Shook is going to carry 2 wide receivers to top 30 value for the rest of the season. But again, we're talking about stashes, and Vele we have a few more buys. We have 2 this week, and we have another 14 buy coming up. And then I mentioned week 14 is the most miserable one, and a lot of big teams on a buy in week 14. So if Vele is going to be the number 2, he basically steps into what Shaheed was doing, which is a wide receiver 4 with some weekly upside that you're going to play the matchups with. I know I just said matchups twice in a row, but that's what we're doing.
That's what we're doing. We're talking about matchups here. All right, last guy we're going to talk about, Luther Burden of the Chicago Bears. Obviously, DJ Moore, non-factor in the game this past weekend. But Luther Burden, another one of these, rookies that we talk about here that we thought at some point might get integrated to this offense. So we did see him work a little bit here. Again, exciting game there for Caleb Williams and company. So what are your thoughts going forward on Luther Burden? Is it finally worth spending a little fab on him and stashing him? Or is this just another one of those situations that you just can't invest in quite yet?
No, this is one where you can. Obviously, the week 3 game against Dallas was the one that we cautioned everybody not to get too excited about because we have 3 wide receivers, 2 tight ends. But what really is non-factor for Moore is also the injury. Like, we don't know. Like, again, as of we recording this, we don't know. But if DJ Moore were to be out this week against the Vikings, Luther Burden immediately stepping into number 2 is the excitement that we said to pause on, and that Luther Burden is essentially a handcuff wide receiver, is that if anything happens to Odunze or DJ Moore in this case, that he can immediately step in. And you saw that in the second half that he really filled in and saw some flashes. It wasn't an amazing game, but it's one that Minnesota, not the best matchup, but let's just say it's an extended, as of today, let's just, if it's an extended mismatch, a departure and missing games for DJ Moore is what I meant to say. Steelers after that. Everybody and their brother throws on the Steelers. And then Eagles, Packers, Browns, not the best after that, but you're short term. DJ Moore misses 1 or 2 games. Luther Burden will be a wide receiver 3 or 4.
All right. Remember, everybody, if you need more help, Waiver Central's here for you. Go sync your leagues for free over at Fantasy Pros. Download the app. Go to fantasypros.com. Maybe we can get that there's a tool for that too. Maybe help Jake Ciely out. But again, fantasypros.com/myplaybook. That's the place to be. Again, sync your leagues. Let the tools help you. And we'll see if we can get a grammar monkey or something like that for Jake Ciely. We'll get him all set up. Maybe one of those, it was a speak and spell. Remember that in the 80s? There's a throwback for you. Yeah. And everybody used to do was just make it say naughty things. That's what everybody did when they had it. So if Jake had spent a little bit less time doing that and a little bit more time using it, perhaps he would be further along. But regardless, The Athletic seems to think he's got good words anyway, and so do I. So great stuff as always from Jake Ciely. It's a hell of a trick, buddy. All right, we'll be back again next week with more names to stash on the waiver wire. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we'll see you next time, kids.